Hey gamers, welcome to another episode of RPGaymer. Today we're going to talk about the PS1 classic and one of my favorite games of all time, Wild Arms 1. And with me today, we have Asters. Hey buddy.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, this was Asters' first time playing this game, correcto?
That is correct.
And this was my, not ashamed to say, probably 40th time playing this game. From launch to now, I've always had it in some capacity, just being in that echelon of Patrick recommends this game heavily. But it's not the same for you because you're not a big RPGer, and I think we need to preface that first, right? And maybe you're not a big turn-based RPGer, correct?
It's definitely been very selective throughout the years. I have experience with certain turn-based RPGs, but definitely the library of the available games that I've gone through is not very large, let alone beaten. This is actually the first classic JRPG that I've played from start to finish and beaten the final bosses and everything.
I was actually super impressed when you were saying that too, because we've talked about Parasite Eve on this channel, and some people could say Parasite Eve is an RPG and whatnot, but this game, if what people think of JRPGs, this is exactly what they're thinking about, which is hilarious because of the whole Wild West theme and whatnot. But I'm curious, being someone who hasn't really played many turn-based RPGs, it may be someone who's dabbled but really hasn't been into too many. What were your expectations going into Wild Arms? And then maybe we can talk about too what was happening as you were actually playing it.
Yeah, so expectations, I have played enough of them and watched enough retrospective videos on them through YouTube to have a general expectation of especially for the system that it was on, okay, it's gonna be top-down, walking around, going through towns and dungeons, turn-based battle, probably some form of end of the world, gotta save the world type affair with the story. And yeah, just kind of the typical. I was definitely going into Wild Arms with at least this would be a good beginner JRPG for somebody who wanted to get into the older classic games but didn't know where to start.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right about that. I think this game has that nice simplicity to it, but it also, has enough going on in terms of exploration and a decent enough story. Nothing wild, but a decent enough story.
Except them arms.
Except them arms. But yeah, to keep someone interested. So I agree with you. If there was someone who was I am open to a JRPG, I'm not worried about graphics or anything like that, what would be one of the first ones? This could, if you were just the standard, this I think game is for sure the standard. Let's talk about the Wild West theme then first, and I kind of want to talk from my perspective here too, on just being the veteran here on this was a huge selling point for me when I was a kid. Getting this early. I remember my mom, she got it for me at Valentine's Day, around the time that it came out ish. And I remember getting it in the mail from Indiana, and a giant thing of those hot hearts, the cinnamon hearts, but the gummy ones, not the little ones, the ones that were big gummies. I remember just this is the vivid memory of this game. I got the player's guide, I got the game, and those giant gummy hearts, and it was the most wonderful thing that you could want.
Somehow the cinnamon gummy heart candy does scream Wild West to me.
Yeah,
it fits the aesthetic, in that taste sense type of way. I never thought about that until you mentioned that, but that's funny.
I think too, coming in from me being big RPGer, big JRPGer, a lot of the games prior to this, aside from maybe Phantasy Star, they were very fantasy heavy or had like notes of sci-fi, but we never really got this like Wild West. But I'm curious, how did that resonate with you with, like decades of games between when this came out and like now, where there are a lot of more Western themed games?
So it's funny you mention all of this because I actually went into it expecting a lot more Wild West themes and imagery than there actually was. They definitely are there. Like even just the box art, and you've got like the spaghetti western music that's being incorporated into it. A lot of the towns, the smaller towns, definitely give off that vibe.
Yeah, there's a juxtaposition. It's like we're a fantasy game, but we're also trying to include Wild West. And I'm happy that you said that, because the smaller towns, definitely Wild West. The larger towns,
yeah,
are literally
you
are
still
castles
got,
and whatnot.
yeah, you
They're
still
not...
got castles. You're sailing the ocean on a sort of kind of a pirate ship, but not a pirate ship. And like you've still got your general kind of fantasy dungeons and stuff like that, but then you've also got that mixed with in the more boss area stuff, you've got like some kind of like retro futuristic stuff going on as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a mashup of a little bit of everything. I think personally where you hear it the most would be the music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I actually didn't know this until we tackled the Wild Arms series with David Vink in Gaming Productions. I did a little research on the music, and I didn't realize that basically the entirety of the tracks, any of the ones that have like a Western feel to them, come from an Italian composer named Ennio Morricone. And he's the guy who did like a lot of the music for old Western movies, like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
So they actually got him to do the scores for the...
I don't think they did. I think like they riffed them. Because
okay. So they just took a heavy amount of inspiration.
Yeah, and when I mean like some of it's literal, like the World Map song, there's a commercial that's on right now, like if you watch on Hulu and whatnot, that you hear that song, and it's directly the World Map. I'm gonna make you listen to it when we're done. But yeah, like 5 or 6, maybe closer to 8 songs are completely based off of this one guy's music that he made for Wild West movies. And it's kind of like interesting to think that like, you're listening to it, you're jamming out, you're having a good time when you're playing this game, but then you like listen to this guy's music and you're like, oh man, they like totally stole that, didn't they?
It's funny to think about, because I'm sure back then, with the niche that video game JRPGs were at the time, and also probably the scores of Wild West movies, I'm sure it was a lot less likely that they were going to get hit with like a cease and desist or something like that. And it's like, even if there are parts that are just straight rips from the songs, like it definitely sounds like it's out of love and out of appreciation for that niche sound that they wanted to incorporate into their world, rather than them trying to be like, yes, we definitely came up with this, and this is like all original us.
Yeah, well, we'll wait till you actually listen to it to hear what you think about when you hear how literal some of it is. But for me, like, the music really sold the game. I know I'm kind of like you, where like you make music. I'm an avid music listener, and music is definitely one of the first things that gauges how much I'm going to enjoy a game and whatnot. And it's those tracks, the ones that they did like took their inspiration from, were the ones that really like got me into the vibe of the game. Like the introduction to the game, every time you load the game up, lives rent free, like,
and that's kind of why I'm more okay with it. Like, as a musician, I obviously I wouldn't take somebody's riff like word like note for note and pretend it's mine, but if I hear a type of melody or a part in a song and I'm like, wow, I really love the sound of that, I want to incorporate this vibe that I'm feeling from this part into something that I'm writing, and I usually do switch up the elements to some degree to make it more of mine. But you know, I just make music for fun. I'm not trying to like, you know, go out there and sell it. So the idea of them taking that vibe and that aesthetic and trying to recontextualize it into the world of Wild Arms, I can still respect that, even if maybe some other people would feel some type of way about the amount of liberties they didn't take with the sound.
Sure,
you know,
because I mean, there are some tracks in the game that I feel like don't completely work. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of the regular battle track.
It felt like a Pokemon track.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily fit the game as much. But I do love the victory fanfare. Any game that gives you a victory fanfare typically is a win in that way.
I've never been annoyed by a victory fanfare. You can definitely have battle music that gets grating, but you never get tired of the victory fanfare, probably because it is a sign that the music you're getting tired of is over.
Oh, well, maybe that could be true too. And I mean, the boss tracks definitely work really well.
Boss tracks are really cool.
Did you have any, speaking of bosses, because we're here, did you have any bosses that you kind of like loved the design of, or their track or anything like that?
I really love Boomerang.
Yeah, oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah, and just like his design, I love how his introduction into the game is kind of just like, it's kind of just, he's not there for any particular reason other than he just wants to be there. It's like, you know, I'm here for the hunt. I'm here to catch my prey. And he like doesn't really get any backstory. And yeah, like he shows up in his cool character design and his cool music, and he literally just throws a boomerang at you and like hangs out with like a cool like spirit wolf thing. And it's just like, it's all of the hallmarks of like cool, awesome teenager 90s stuff that like the like suspension of disbelief is just, you don't need it. It's just like, this is cool because look at
because
it.
this bitch is fighting with human-sized boomerangs.
Yeah,
like
and his name is Boomerang. Like,
you need to check out Alter Code F. I know you've considered playing through the series because it sparked the interest, and like some of the games are better, some of the games are worse, but 1, 3, and Alter Code F kind of have this like continuity where like everything feels very familiar, and I know they all kind of contain this, like you'll notice little names of the summons and stuff like that, and little things that pop in.
Well, 1 and 3 definitely have the most of that Wild West theme too.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about 3 in a little bit. It's gonna come up, but like,
for sure.
I love Zed. I'm with you on Boomerang. Like, Boomerang is very awesome, but Zed's track, for me, is one of the most fun boss tracks I can think of in JRPG. Like, I was always excited when Zed was on.
I love his presence in the game because he's like one of like 2 whole instances of comic relief in the game. It's like whenever he's on screen and the wedding with Cecilia and the ship captain, those 2 scenes are just so randomly over the top against an otherwise like pretty relatively serious storyline and pacing and everything, and then Zed just shows up and he's just like, I am the ninja master, I shall take you down, and it's just like you kick his ass and he's just kind of like this bumbling henchman type vibe.
Yeah, it's I think the cast of villains could feel a little samey. I know his name is like Belselk in the game, but that was a translation error. It's really Berserk.
Oh, okay.
They fix a lot of the translation errors in Alter Code F, which is a lot more. Yeah. Well, no, they flesh everything out in Alter Code F, like sincerely. But I feel like a lot of the villains can feel samey, but that's kind of why I liked Boomerang and Zed, just because
they were outliers.
Yeah, they didn't fit the quartet. Like the quartet, you know, like all four of them, even Siegfried, like just kind of felt the same. So it was cool.
Right.
They're cool. Okay, well let's carry it over a little bit more. What were some of the aspects of the game that were working for you or that weren't working for you?
So some smaller things that I wasn't expecting out of it. I wasn't expecting like the running. I wasn't expecting the running with like drift mechanics.
Oh, I love it.
Which is just really cool. I love how in video games in general, if there is a way that makes your character move faster, or even just the illusion that it moves faster, you're going to do that. Like, you know, in like character action games, even if your jump
you dash.
Move faster,
dashes.
you're just
Everybody
dashing, you're jumping just to make it seem like you're moving faster.
Yeah, everyone
but
does
in Wild
that.
Arms, you literally are like revving up like a Scooby-Doo character and like going off, and then you can like, you know, you can time your turns. There's a mini game earlier in the game where it's like, you know, you do like the Chrono Trigger style like race, which I think is really cool with the drift mechanics.
I think it's one of those things too where you know, it really helps with the pacing of the game, especially when you get Rudy's
roller skates,
blades,
yeah,
because you can cut encounters out if you use those. Like I know
Yes.
running you can still get
Yup.
encounters, but
Yup.
you don't. I think
you're
there
just
are a lot
just
of...
bashing your head into walls over and over again because
like how
God
that's the
forbid
first-
you get into an encounter.
I like how that's the first thing that you bring up, but I also get it because I think you can see that some of the biggest inspirations on this game are Legends of Zelda.
For sure.
Speaking with like my JRPG wisdom, you know, I can only think of one game that did puzzles like this before this, which was Lufia 2 for the Super Nintendo, which is
Right.
also a very excellent game. But I feel like this was the first time that we really saw it, because Lufia 2 is pretty niche. I know, you know, this was one of the PS1 Classics games. More people played Wild Arms to the point where this series like really continued and flourished from here. I think it's just such a good idea to give something more to do when you go into dungeons, even though like not all of the puzzles are that complex, just because I think it's one of those things that you really remember and it keeps you engaging with the world more, versus there are so many JRPGs that when you play them you're just walking through a dungeon, you know, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, all the map items was basically the other thing I was gonna say, which it felt very Zelda-esque in that you're using them to like solve puzzles. I'm not sure if the early Tales games had the Sorcerer's Ring mechanic.
They actually did. I
Okay.
played Fantasia, which I think is a wonderful game. I know, again, another really slow pace because it was the first of its series, but they actually had the Sorcerer's Ring in that game, and you would use it for some small puzzles. But I remember, like, right before, we've talked about this a couple times, and you saying, like, I'm not the biggest JRPG person. You just there made that connection.
Oh yeah,
of, like, you've seen that. You've seen this in Tales games. Like,
I'm
seen
an
Symphonia,
action
so...
JRPGer, so it's like I have played anything with an action or real-time combat system. I've probably at least tried, if not beaten. It is specifically like the turn-based JRPGs that have taken me a lot longer to dip my toes into for a few different reasons. But
well, actually, let's talk about that. Being someone who's not the biggest on turn-based RPGs, how did you get through Wild Arms, and what kinds of things did you enjoy about it?
So I did like, I like it. I'm someone who just, my attention span is poo poo doo doo, and I can only spend so much time.
Didn't you name one of your spells poo poo doo doo?
It was that. See, oh, that was another thing that I really loved about the game that I hadn't seen before, is getting to name your spells. I really enjoyed the crest system. The crest system was very fun. Getting to pick spells, getting to name spells, because I would just name all of my first level spells just the silliest, goofiest, sometimes most vulgar shit. And using them was fun, but then forgetting I had them, and then an enemy using one of those spells, but it's still using the name that I set to it. So it's like I'm playing and I'm fighting this really, you know, terrifying looking creature, and then uses a sleep
skeet.
No, he uses a sleep spell on me, and it just says "Go to sleep, bitch."
So funny.
So it's just I really enjoyed that. But for the turn-based system in general, I liked that if you want to just mash and brute force it, you really can for the most part. There is a lot of options, like Cecilia, you can use status ailment stuff. For Jack, you have all of his different secret sign stuff. For Rudy, you've got all of his arms. But for the most part with Jack, you really only need like pretty much like two. You have the one that attacks multiple enemies, then once you get slash rave, it's all over. Because like once you hit like a 20. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that, because I know we were talking to Jared about this in our Discord chat recently, where he said like Rudy was useless, and it's like those luck-based attacks in this game, Slash Rave and Twin Orbs, wreck the game. Your earliest instances of doing max damage are those two attacks. Like Rudy, his arms are relatively diverse, and I think they make the game really fun, even if they are pricey. Like, I think it's so cool to think you have this character that you can influence what they can do by like buying into and upgrading that.
See that, and that's the thing. Twin Orbs was the only arm of his that I didn't use.
I
didn't know it was luck based. I was pumping so much money into the Prism Ray, the rocket launcher, and the bazooka.
Yeah, rocket launcher and phaser are like, if you're
and the phaser, yes.
Once I got the phaser, the Twin Orbs are perfectly serviceable. It's still doing a great amount of damage. But I think that's really cool, because you think of a lot of JRPGs before this, and typically you have characters that can like basically do the same thing, and then they do little things different. And I feel like Jack, Rudy, and Cecilia really had different roles that they played.
For sure.
And the way that, you know, they did those things was really, really hyper focused, and I thought that was really nice. Like, Cecilia is kind of your all-rounder, can do a little bit of everything aside from just like physical damage.
Honestly,
you know,
there were some times like when she gets a crit off, like you can get up to like 400 damage, and if like you're just trying to like finish off an enemy and she's like down to no MP, there were a few like more major battles where I was basically just using Mystic and physical damage on her, and she was holding her own.
Do you think that this turn-based system is super dated though? Because I know it. So I platinumed this recently on PS5. I think maybe like a year or two ago, and you know, especially with the high encounter rate, it's a little bit of a slog. I don't mind it in boss battles. I think there's some really good like technical things going on, but I think you know, when it's just the everyday encounter, there's really nothing special about it. I think because of the force system, you really don't get to see the different layers of what characters can do in the turn-based system until you start getting to higher force levels.
Yeah, no, I agree. That being said, for the more major battles, I was definitely enjoying the turn-based system. There were some points where I'm not like, there's a bit of a consistency issue with what areas in dungeons are still going to give you encounters during puzzles and which aren't. Like there were some dungeons where I was doing a puzzle and walking around and I'm like, wow, I've been doing this puzzle for a while and nothing has like jumped out at me yet. And then there are other places where I'm just trying to do some block moving puzzles and it's just like I still have to worry about the encounters. And so it was kind of yeah, and once I got the roller skates, you just kind of, you know, you just skate around and bash into walls and just, you know, elongate your time without encounters for a little bit, and that kind of makes the traversal and the pacing a little bit more bearable. But there was a point where the encounters, just regular encounters, were getting kind of dated for me throughout the game.
I think you said, too, you didn't know that you could cast the invisible spell. Is that right?
I did not find out that I could do that until probably halfway to a little bit halfway through the game, because I think, yeah, Jared in the Discord mentioned that. And granted, you still can run into encounters while using invisible. It just takes
absolutely.
a lot longer.
It's like using
and
repel in Pokemon.
It's also relatively expensive for Cecilia. Like, I think it was like 8 MP or something like that.
It's like using repel in Pokemon, where, like, you know, you still get the chance of running into some Pokemon. It just, like,
yeah, but the difference is your Pokemon aren't losing their PP points by using the repel.
True.
So I just wanted PP points. Just wanted to throw that one out there.
PP points. PP points. What were some of your favorite moments in the game?
So I really love...
this is a spoiler area, obviously. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, if you're listening and you don't want the game spoiled, you might want to skip the section a little bit, but how about you?
So I really liked, the subversion of, so, you know, you've got all the knights, gathering the, like, the 4 grand cardinal knights of, like, the evil, villainous, people. And their, you know, whole plan is like, oh, we're gonna revive Mother, this evil demon who was gonna destroy the world 1,000 years ago, got sealed up, etc. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna revive you, and we're gonna take over the world. Yeah, like, very typical affair. And then Mother is like, my children, thank you for reviving me. Now I will devour the planet and everyone on it, and it will become a part of my essence. And the knights are just like, wait, but you mean, like, we're gonna go off and, like, conquer other stuff together, right? And she's like, no, I'm gonna eat you. And they're just like, and I thought that was awesome. I really like stories where that kind of subversion is like a good portion of the story, because I want to say that was like maybe barely halfway through the game.
That's definitely the halfway. Like, you believably could think that was the end of the game.
Yes.
Had you actually fought Siegfried. I don't think you fight him at that point, because you basically just go straight to fighting Mother at that point, which I agree with you. It is really interesting to think, like, if you didn't have that meta knowledge, why aren't the other people trying to stop me? Like, they still exist.
No, for sure. And then I also really loved, I personally would have preferred Rudy be just a full fleshed out talking character as opposed to a mostly silent protagonist. Because I really liked the concept for his story of, like, you know, when he sacrifices his arm, his literal, like, body part arm, to protect Cecilia and Jack, and they find out he's this, you know, this robot demon creature hybrid thing. And there's I think I remember there was, like, initial, like, fear from Cecilia being like, whoa, what are you? And then Jack was like, he's our friend. And then that kind of kicks off, like, the actual, like, these are my friends. I've been traveling with them. I'm fighting with them. I'm here to protect them.
So I always wondered, like, what angle the creators had to make him silent.
Mostly silent.
Well, yeah, because I know he does, like, he has a couple lines, and like, in dream sequences and whatnot, he gets some lines there, too. But I always, like, is it because they were reflecting the other media at the time? Like, you know, this is around the time of Chrono Trigger and other games like that, and Legends of Zelda, you know, very Link in a way. Or is it because they wanted to highlight that, you know, like, there is something special about him, and it is because he's, like, part machine? I don't know the answer to that, but I just always thought that was really interesting.
I just, like, it's, if you're gonna make him a fully if you're gonna make him a silent protagonist, like make him a fully silent protagonist like Link, so that the player can feel like a catalyst for the main character. Because we had just played Shining Force 2 a few months ago. And
another silent protagonist game. He only
Another
talks like 3 times.
mostly, and that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It was just it was very jarring to see Rudy have a text box all of a sudden after playing hours and hours and hours of just assuming that he's a silent protagonist. And so that really pulls me out of the story a lot more than if he had just been a fully, completely silent protagonist. Because
I almost wonder too, like, would it have been so wrong just to make him mute?
That's literally what I was about to say. I was gonna say, if it's almost kind of like an R2-D2 type thing where he just R2-D2 just makes a bunch of beeps and whirs and stuff, and everyone just happens to sort of kind of understand what he's saying, or like Chewbacca and Han Solo, and it's just like there's just this unspoken understanding of what they're saying, even though to us it's like illegible, because it's like, a lot of how they talk to Rudy and treat him throughout the game really is as if he were mute, because it's a lot of characters being like, oh man, like, Rudy, do you feel this way? You're right. Like, there is that thing. Yeah, that's right, Rudy. Like, they're almost kind of answering for him as if he communicated to them in some way, shape, or form.
Well, yeah, and he does. That's why I'm curious, like, what the purpose, what their direction was with that. And I feel like that's just one thing that people, when they create narratives, like, you need to think about angles like that, because yeah, if you want to go with the silent protagonist thing, I don't think people have too much of a problem with it. But like we're saying, is it because they can't talk? Is it because you don't want to give them a personality? If it's something like Dragon Quest, where almost all the I think actually all the protagonists are silent, but you give them the choice to answer, but it doesn't matter what their answer is because the same thing happens anyway.
Right.
Like, what are our reasons here? Well, I loved any arc with the Guardians. I know as a kid that was a big pull. I thought it was really cool thinking of these like governing bodies of the world that were like believably of the world, and how they really influenced the events. I know a big part of it, you think of First Nations, Native American culture and whatnot, especially meeting the Baskars and whatnot. I just thought there was this really nice earthly connection with what was going on with the Guardians.
I know,
and the desperation of like them getting deleted, you know what I mean? Like their statues getting removed and like basically their power dwindling. I felt that sense of the world is getting destroyed and like we're failing as opposed to
I really liked that combination of this like spiritual essence also getting mixed with some kind of like the retro future type vibe, especially like with the golems. I really
the golems are really cool too.
That they are these. I especially love the golems because like I love the golem folklore myth from like Jewish mythology is like one of my favorites. Jacob Geller does like a really, really good video on the different iterations and adaptations of that story. And I just really love that in Filgaia, the golems are these entities that just want to exist but have been used as like weapons in the past, and like that's a big point of the relationship between the Earth Golem and Cecilia. And I really like how the spiritual acknowledgement of them as entities with feelings, humanizes them in a way while still acknowledging their sense of, kind of lesser omnipotence. Man,
you really need to continue with the series. I genuinely think you can skip 2. I don't think it's...
I'm giving it a chance.
I know you're in this, like, era of I will play games that people don't tend to like, and I super appreciate that because we were talking about Parasite Eve 2, and I feel like I'm a big defender. I do find it hard to defend Wild Arms 2 for a multitude of reasons. I won't go over them here just because we're talking about one, and I don't want to ruin that for you.
Hey, we'll have time to go into it in another episode if
yes,
we end up
will.
Getting there.
But another one I just recently replayed and also platinum because it's also available on PlayStation. But Wild Arms 3, like, you're gonna see, I think it does a really good job of continuing what Wild Arms 1 did and giving it that Wild West feel still, like really, really, really going hard on that.
I definitely got that vibe. I had played, I want to say, the first 3 or 4 hours of Wild Arms 3. That was actually the first dipping into Wild Arms that I did ever at all. I think I went into it maybe like a year and a half ago, got to like the 3 or 4 hour mark, and then just ended up putting it down. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting back into that one.
Some of those motifs that pop up in the first game, and some of the icons, like the things that if you were playing Final Fantasy, you're like, oh, of course this is in every Final Fantasy game, of course this is in every Final Fantasy game, like that's what you start to see in Wild Arms 3. And I just think they do a really good job of being like, oh my god, that's so cool. So we'll wait for that. But let's wrap up on this. Would you recommend Wild Arms to other gamers? And then what type of gamer do you think like would enjoy this the most? Like, is there still something to glean from this game, or do you think we're kind of past its prime?
I think if like, because specifically, like I said, like retro turn-based JRPGs, like that specific SNES to PlayStation 1 era, in between there is just so many iconic games to the genre and to the niche that I definitely am looking forward to getting more into. But I think Wild Arms 1, I think very competently, especially for a company that had literally just made 2 shooters before this game, and this was their first like RPG in general. Like, they did a really good job of incorporating a lot of the gimmicks from the genre while still kind of making it its own, but also making it very accessible. Like, if someone came to me asking what is a good classic JRPG to start with to just get into, just the feeling of exploration, the feeling of the turn-based battle systems, of getting equipment, using status ailments, using items, just all of that, I would recommend this game, just because like I think because this game releasing before Final Fantasy VII kind of ended up, I think if this game had released post Final Fantasy VII, it would have gotten a lot more wider appeal because that JRPG boom would have happened. But for what it is, I would definitely recommend it to someone. I think the only thing really at the end of the day that didn't age well with me were just the graphics for the actual encounters.
Yeah, well, like... and it's weird because, I mean, you think of it, that weird consistency, because the world map exploration or just like non-combat looks like it was made in RPG Maker. Like, even to the point with like in my own dev journey, I'm seeing a lot of like, oh yeah, this literally looked like they built it out of just like stock assets and stock sound effects. You kind of get that every time monsters get hit, and then you go into the really strange combat. But I also understand
it's like you just have Funko Pops battling Bionicle monsters.
But there was such a huge push for 3D games.
Oh yeah,
that like you're on the PlayStation, things should be 3D. I get it, especially there are very few RPGs before this, because Wild Arms 1 was, I would say, probably the first really successful RPG on the PS1. And like you said, it got kind of landslided by Final Fantasy VII, but like the ones before that, like Beyond the Beyond, not a great game. And like even more so, like did not have any really like 3D combat or anything like that. But this game was still a huge step up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And by saying that, it's like it wasn't a deal breaker for me. It's just that was the portion of the game that felt like clashed with the rest of the game more than anything else.
Yeah. I will always advocate for this game. I think a lot of people are getting more into retro. Now I think there's a bigger appreciation for it because every time somebody throws out the asinine thought that our turn-based RPG is dead, I feel like millions of people are like, hell no. So I feel like if there are people that do enjoy turn-based RPGs that want to get into, like a pretty good series, I think mediocre at worst is a pretty good way to describe Wild Arms. Like Wild Arms 2 and 4 are like mediocre at worst, and the rest are actually like good games. That's a good note to leave on. So, if you want to buy into something new, this is a good one. This is a good series to pick up.
Oh yeah.
Well, as usual, we want to hear your thoughts, so leave some lovely comments down below. And if you want to join the daily conversation, head on over to our Discord at RPGaymer. We want to thank you all for listening. Now go out there and get gaming.